Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's episode of Lewis Presents. I'm standing in the Matalan car park here off Kirkdale Road in Leytonstone in the East End of London. And you might think, what am I doing standing in the car park? Well, what you see behind me now is the Matalan department store. But what used to be there once was the Bearman's department store, which was like the Harrods of East London in its day. But next to it, and on the site of this car park, used to be an old cinema. It was known the Rialto cinema, and it was Leytonstone's last cinema. It closed down in 1974. It started life in 1911 as the Rink Picture Palace. And in 1927, Sidney Bernstein bought the cinema and renamed it the Rialto. In 1928, Gaumont Theatres took it over, and in 1934, the seating capacity in this cinema was increased to 1,884 seats. During the Second World War, this cinema did suffer as a result of bombing. In Kirkdale Road, just behind me, a V-1 rocket landed in January 1945, killing 6 people, and put this cinema out of action for 9 months. In October 1945, it reopened. But during the 40s, 50s and 60s, this used to bring a lot of happiness to a lot of young kids when they used to have Saturday morning pictures here. They used to show Buck Rogers, Abbott and Costello. They used to have the Rialto Rangers and the Rialto Grenadiers. But into the 60s, the early 60s especially, cinemas all over the country started closing down as a result of the advent of TV. TV becoming the more popular choice for the working classes to watch, or anybody to watch. And the cinemas in Leytonstone started to close down one by one. March 1961, the Rick Cinema closed down. July 1961, the State Cinema went. And then in January 1963, the Academy closed down. And it only left Leytonstone with one cinema here at the Rialto. Recently, I was having dinner with the ex-chief projectionist here, Nigel Mantle. And he told me that he worked here from 1963 to 1974. When he first started working here in 1963, there was 8 members of staff. By the early 1970s, it had been whittled down to 3 members of staff. So the cinema was getting ready for closure itself. He said during the weekdays there were no matinees, or if they did have matinees on, sometimes there'd be 20 or 30 people in a cinema that held 1,800. But some great films were shown here during the 60s and the 50s. Alfred Hitchcock's movies were shown here, Torn Curtain, Frenzy, Marnie. The Longest Day. My mum and dad came on their first date here in 1962 and saw Sean Connery as 007 as James Bond in the film Dr. No. The Longest Day, Lawrence of Arabia, Zulu. But sadly the end was to come for this cinema. In 1967, Granada Cinemas took it over and it became known as the Granada. And on the 27th of April 1974, the last movie was shown here. It was Virginia McKenna in Swallows and Amazons. And sadly the cinema was closed and left derelict for the next couple of years while the Bearmans who owned it decided what to do with it. The organ that used to be here was taken out and now resides in a church in Bristol. But the Rialto, after a couple of years, was sadly demolished. And now all you see is the car park behind me. But you might wonder, why does the car park here at Matalan slope? It slopes because it was built on the old sloping auditorium of the once Rialto Cinema. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Lewis Presents. It was entitled The Rialto. Thanks for watching.